So managing. I mean, just to say, we draw this diagram as three circles, but we absolutely know these three essences of self, other, and situation are not essences, and they're not separate. They're all intertwined. And in a sort of radical field perspective, this notion of the field and the situation underpins everything. So although we've got situation there off to one side, think of it as a fundament, a foundation that gives rise to self and other in the moment. And so we'll be asking you about, what situations have you encountered over 2020 that have led you to think, I need to manage myself and or my relationships and or this situation um, in a way that I think some of you know I was initially trained as a psychologist. We would call psychological resourcing, you know, to acquire, to mindfully and alertly acquire additional resources or strategies for dealing with what's going on. To many of us as Gestalt practitioners, this idea of actively taking a stand and saying, that's enough, I need to do something different, is a real challenge, because we're sort of much more familiar with this notion of accepting and acknowledging. Whereas managing says, no, actually, there's a tsunami of something coming towards me that I now need to thicken my boundary and manage myself in a very active way. Now, this idea, I'm just going to read you a little bit from Pearls, Hefferline and Goodman, chapter 2, which is one of my favorite chapters, about contacting the environment. And it's all about experimenting. And, every time I read Pearls, Hefferline and Goodman, I'm reminded of sort of an image I have in my mind of California in the 60s and, everybody experimenting with free love and all this sort of stuff. And I think, okay, there was an idea inherent in this book, subtitled Excitement and Growth, that rather than managing, we should be feeling the actual. But there is even here a note of caution where it says, if you wish to uncover self-defeating behavior and to change it gradually, staying always within the limits of what he cares to tolerate, that is another matter. So from the outset in Gestalt, we have this notion of what's tolerable, and that when something is intolerable for us, we need to move away and manage it. And certainly the business of psychology, in a way, is of managing, of planning, of structuring, of fortifying, and of setting a limit, of pushing away something that potentially might overwhelm. And I'm just going to name a few strategies that came to me as I reflected on this. And I was realizing that when I worked as a mental health practitioner, one of the first things that we did in a mental health setting was what was called a stress MOT. This is an interesting sort of place to start, where there was an assumption that if you've got a slight mood disturbance, then probably there are some sort of ground zero behaviors that you need to check out before we even consider your emotional state. And these would be your diet. Are you eating enough, often enough, of the right sort of food? What are you drinking? You're drinking enough good fluids, or you're drinking too much of something that's not helping you, coffee, alcohol? You're doing the right sort of exercise? And how are your so-called comfort tricks getting on? You shopping too much, you gambling too much, you spending too much. And as I reflected, I thought, no, it's really interesting. The moment I felt that I was potentially going to be overwhelmed by COVID, I was up there in the mornings, exercising in front of my TV, making all sorts of, comments about what I was going to do to stay healthy. I was going to change my sleep routine. I was going to change my diet. I was going to get out every day. And so we're curious about how those things come to prominence or not for you. There's the whole positive psychology movement, staying positive, think, be hopeful, gratitude practices, focus on things that are good in your life. Reframe your situation as an opportunity. Start to think maybe that this situation could be beneficial and focus on that. Look at solutions, so-called miracle questions, or at the end of this, what will good look like? What do you want to be? And aim hard for an outcome, an end point. Spend more time in nature, forest bathing, stroke your pets more. Deliberately, with awareness, make connections with family and friends. But on the other hand, manage how much time you're withdrawing and pay attention to that. There's a whole load on management about don't forget to be spiritual. Pray often if you need to. And in that, we're also asked to continue to be authentic, be true to ourselves, practice compassion, and stay present to what is. So by using some of these strategies in a very mindful way, these are designed to fortify and help us manage the situation.